One of the major pieces in federalism that is taking place at this historic time in our history is a piece of legislation that will be signed maybe next week or the week after, I'm not sure, but the bill is on President Biden's desk. The Inflation Reduction Act, where there'll be over $369 billion that will be authorized for appropriation. You might want to have, if you have some questions about that, you might want to save them for the next speaker. It's my honor this morning to introduce the Special Assistant to the President, President Biden for Climate Policy. And let me just read his bio for you. I think you'll be impressed. I am so honored, and we should all be, that we were able to get him to be with us this morning. He's actually on the West Coast, so a few hours earlier than we are at the moment. David J. Hayes is a Special Assistant to President for the President for Climate Policy. As part of his climate portfolio, Hayes leads White House work on clean energy deployment issues, including offshore wind, onshore renewable energy, and transmission siting and permitting, climate resilience, including establishment of new interagency structures, funding, data, and mapping tools to address cross-cutting resiliency issues in greenhouse gas emission reduction and carbon sequestration initiatives. Immediately prior to joining the White House, David Hayes was Executive Director of the State and Energy and Environment Impact Center at NYU School of Law, where he worked with state attorneys general on climate, environmental, and clean energy initiatives. He previously served as Deputy Secretary and Chief Operating Officer at the U.S. Department of Interior for Presidents Barack Obama and President Bill Clinton. He was a climate policy advisor for the Biden-Harris transition of 2020 and led the Energy and Environmental Agency review teams for the Obama-Biden transition in 2008. Hayes is a former distinguished visiting lecturer at the Stanford Law School, a former fellow at Stanford University's Precourt Institute for Energy and Woods Institute for the Environment, and the former chairman of the board of the Environmental Law Institute. Hayes is a graduate of the University of Notre Dame and Stanford Law School. He is with us as I look on the screen, and Special Assistant to the President, Hayes, while you might not be able to see all of us, in a few minutes, I just want you to hear all of us as we give you a big CSG welcome this morning. Thank you for being with us, David Hayes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Senator Pacheco. I hope you can all hear me okay.
Yes, we can, yes.
Okay, terrific. So it's a pleasure to follow Governor Sununu this morning. And as you might expect, my remarks this morning are going to focus on environmental issues, climate issues that are so real and present for us, conservation issues, health issues, they all go together, as you well know. And like many of you, probably all of you, these issues have been part of your political life and your private life for your entire career. And, you know, they've always been important, but I think never more important than now. Climate issues are very much in our face right now. we've had periods where environmental issues have been in the headlines and in our neighborhoods, back to Love Canal and the issues of pollution that affect our cities and our countrysides. But now, with the climate impacts that we're seeing from extreme weather, the floods, the extreme heat, the drought, the wildfires, the sea rise, the storm surge, these amazing and frightening and damaging and life-threatening and life-taking events, climate change is here now in a very disturbing way. And, you know, unlike environmental issues in the past, which have been important, but have not been central to our economy, I would say, where we've had to deal with the end of pipe issues, end of the smokestack issues. Here, climate issues, environmental issues are central to our economy because it's the fact that we have a fossil fuel-based economy that is causing climate change. There's no doubt about the science on this question. And to whip climate, we need to change to a clean energy economy. It's how much more central can you get than that? Now, all of you in the states and in the provinces have seen this coming, and you all have really been at the forefront of this. The federal government has been lagging, but particularly in the East, the states have been leaders. And obviously, Senator Pacheco has been at the head of that, and it's a great honor to be introduced by him. And the fact that he formed the State Legislative Climate Alliance and opened it up to the whole nation, I think speaks well of the commitment of this organization, the Council of State Governments, and its intent to ensure that at the local and state level, environmental issues, climate issues get the attention that they deserve. And last week, I have to note, Massachusetts took another big step in its leadership with its electric vehicle mandate, its electrification of buildings authority given to local governments, its promotion of more public transit, just the latest example. And many of your eastern states, again, have been out at the forefront. And I see it in particular in our work at the federal level on offshore wind, where it was the state aggressive clean energy targets and the need to find new clean energy opportunities that led so many states to take the strong fiscally responsible step of investing in offshore wind. And that's creating a brand new industry in our country. Be happy to talk more about it in a little bit and maybe in the Q&A. But we just had a meeting in the White House about 3 weeks ago with the president. He was going to stop by our meeting with 7 governors and with 4 union leaders and 4 executives of offshore wind developers. He's going to stop by. He did stop by, and he stayed for a complete hour as he listened to what is going on in the offshore wind industry, which already has invested $2.7 billion in this new American industry, even though we don't yet have any commercial offshore wind turbines in the water. That's changing, and it's going to change very quickly. So I'm really proud to be working for President Biden and Vice President Harris on the climate agenda. And I want to step back for a couple of minutes before I get to the big reveal that Senator Chico mentioned, which is of course, the Inflation Reduction Act. I want to step back to the beginning of the administration, where President Biden, in the very early days, issued an executive order called Combating Climate Change Here and Abroad, Executive Order 14,008. And he identified climate as one of his 4 primary domestic goals. In that executive order, he returned the U.S. to the international stage, rejoining Paris, appointing Senator Kerry as his special envoy for climate, for the world, and started on that path. Meanwhile, back at home here, he established a new organization in the White House, the National Climate Policy Office, where I work with Gina McCarthy, the National Climate Advisor, a proud Bostonian, and it created a National Climate Task Force, which is made up of all of the cabinet members who gather to speak together on climate. Why? Because climate requires a whole of government response. It's not like an issue that has a home in the Department of Transportation only, or in the Department of Homeland Security, or in the EPA, or in the Interior Department. Again, this is all of the economy effort that needs to change, and it affects every agency. So we have new structures. And the approach that the president took was to, I sort of sum it up as three legs of a stool. Number one, we have to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions that are causing climate change. So we have to look sector by sector and shave off those greenhouse gas emissions, shave them down. We did a nationally determined commitment process last year that said that if we push hard, we can actually reduce greenhouse gas emissions by the end of this decade by 50 to 52% based on 2005 emission standards. And as you'll see, we're on our road, on our way to doing that. That's number one. We've got to reduce those greenhouse gas emissions. Number two, and it's related, we need to accelerate the transition to a clean energy economy. We need to create new industries in the US that are not based on fossil fuels and that will power this change. And number three, we need to deal with climate impacts that are hitting us now. We need our communities to be more resilient in the face of these new dangers that are hitting us every day and that we're seeing every day, this summer just being the latest. So we moved out quickly. We attacked transportation. We got the major auto makers in the US and the global automakers who produce and sell cars in the US to agree that by 2030, half the sales will be electric vehicles. And along the way, we took care of the rollbacks that the Trump administration had done on auto efficiency. We created a regulatory roadmap that would go forward and reduce the gasoline use of these cars, and then pushed for electric vehicles. In industry, we've taken shots at the industries that need attention. The oil and gas industry, methane emissions. We have regulations coming out. We've worked with the oil and gas industry. They know they have a problem. We're looking to use the best technology that we have in the world to identify leaks and to repair and methane leakage. We're showing federal leadership across the board. Our federal agencies are buying clean energy. Our federal agencies are walking the walk, not just talking the talk, walking the walk, buying clean infrastructure, requiring that the asphalt and the aluminum that they buy is low carbon based materials. And we're doing a lot in conservation. This is a really important point. The climate agenda that the president laid out is not just reducing the tons of greenhouse gases, but there's a recognition that there's a synergy between how we care for our broader environment and climate. The synergy is actually obvious. Our landscapes, our waterways, our forests drink in excess carbon dioxide. They help on the in the carbon cycle. That's why the president, in this very first executive order, established something we call the America the Beautiful initiative, which is a commitment to preserve 30% of the landmass and 30% of the oceans by 2030. The word actually is to conserve those lands. And the president does that by not saying we're going to wall it off and everything's going to be a park. But in fact, the president in that executive order said, no, we're going to count working landscapes as well. as a part of the climate solution, because we know that when farmers and ranchers do climate smart practices, cover crops, rotational grazing, etc., that's good for the environment. We're going to count that as part of our conservation goals. Lots going on there. And then the next big thing was the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. Again, we're getting there. We're getting toward the Inflation Reduction Act. But the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law that the president pushed through in a bipartisan way was $1.3 trillion. What people don't realize is that a solid $250 billion of that has climate impacts, positive climate impacts. For example, that law included nearly $40 billion in public transit money. That's good for the climate. More than $60 billion in rail investment. That's good for the climate. $15 billion for electric vehicle charging stations, which we need to move to the transportation economy of the future. 35,000 new electric buses are in that legislation. About $10 billion for new transmission lines that can unlock the renewable energy. The power sector, $8 billion for new hydrogen hubs in rural areas that need the work and can be places for innovation to occur. Money for nuclear research. And that infrastructure law also reflected our environmental values. Billions of dollars to replace lead pipes that were causing, that continue to cause harm in many of our old cities. $15 billion to cap old orphan oil and gas wells. There are hundreds of thousands of them in the US, many of them spurting methane still. We're plugging them. The money's already gone out the door. Another, as part of that $15 billion, we're remediating old coal mines. Again, methane sources. The money's already out the door. And $50 billion to deal with climate resilience. This was in the bipartisan infrastructure law, including billions to deal with the wildfire crisis that's in the West and that could hit New Hampshire. And by investing not just in responding to the wildfires, but managing our forests in a smarter way that will keep keep down the catastrophic nature of these wildfires. Money for drought, money for flood, money for extreme heat, all in the bipartisan infrastructure law. But then last Friday, as I had the honor of being in the Roosevelt room around 5:30 p.m., we celebrated the House passage of the Inflation Reduction Act. This is a stunning piece of legislation. It's got obviously many important features beyond climate. The negotiation of prescription drugs to get those prices down. More provisions for millions to be able to qualify for the Affordable Care Act coverage. Reform of our tax laws, including fair treatment for large corporations to make sure they're paying their fair share. Deficit reduction, $300 billion in deficit reduction, along with our spending. It's amazing, right? We're paying for this and getting more through deficit reduction. And then, of course, what I want to talk about here briefly is the climate piece. As Senator Pacheco said at the outset, $369 billion for climate. That's the largest investment in climate and clean energy in American history by a country mile. And there are big economy-wide moves that we're making here. Again, this is the challenge of climate. We need to change our economy. That's what this law, soon to be law, is all about. It's about putting a 10-year plan in place. Again, these are investments that will be made over the course of the next decade. That's why it's not going to raise inflation. These are investments that are going to be paying off. And the biggest chunk, of course, is to provide incentives for your local utilities and your state-based utilities to purchase more clean energy. We're not doing sticks, we're doing carrots. They're big carrots. 30% tax breaks for wind, for solar, for storage. The market's already going that way. Now it's going to accelerate. And the utilities are going to pass those savings through to consumers. That's what they do. That's what they do. That's why the energy prices for your constituents are going to go down, because this money is it's going to be cheaper than ever. Already, even without these incentives, 80 to 90% of the new energy coming on the grid is wind and solar, wind or solar. That's going to continue and deepify, if you will, with the energy savings going right through. And then, if that's not enough, what about the manufacturing of the components that will be that will be bought by these utilities? The wind turbines, the solar panels, the new storage facilities. $37 billion in manufacturing credits for making these things in America. That's a fundamental theme of this legislation. So we're going to see more wind turbines than ever. We're going to see, for offshore wind, we're going to see vessels built in the U.S. using incentives here. We're going to see solar panels, storage. We're going to obviously see clean vehicles. The manufacturers who will be producing these goods are getting tax credits. But there's a catch. For every one of these tax credits, the manufacturers have to demonstrate that they're going to be paying prevailing wages, and they're going to be providing apprenticeship opportunities. We're going to train American workers in these new industries, and where we're going to be required that they're paid well. As the president said, he wants union labor to be a piece of this renaissance, and it will be. It's hardwired into this legislation. And there's an additional bonus in a number of these manufacturing provisions, 10% more if you locate that new manufacturing facility in a disadvantaged community. So this is about people. It's not just about climate. The list goes on. $30 billion for nuclear power to continue to keep our nuclear plants going. We need that clean energy. And another $22 billion for the next generation of clean power, including the next generation of nuclear power, geothermal power, and biofuels. And then finally, to emphasize a point that I just made a minute ago, this law really focuses not just on those big industry players, but on your constituents, your family, your neighbors. The little guy matters in this bill. Let me explain why and how. First of all, these energy credits and opportunities are extended to households. There's a 30% tax credit for homes that will put solar power on their roofs. That'll save them money, $300 a year in electricity bills, and it will obviously produce clean energy. That applies not just to individual households, but to communities that build community solar for the benefit of the local businesses and for folks who live in apartment buildings, et cetera, with an additional 10% credit if you're in a low-income community. So the idea is to bring clean energy into your house and into your community. Also, in order to change our economy from a fossil fuel-based economy to a clean energy economy, we need to electrify our homes. We shouldn't be combusting fossil fuels in our homes, in our businesses. So rather than regulate them, we have incentives in this law, including incentives to install efficient home appliances. Under this law, households will be able to receive tax credits to reduce the cost of highly efficient heating and cooling equipment like air conditioners, water heaters, furnaces, heat pumps by 30%. Again, saving money on utility bills and providing actually a special credit of up to $2,000 for electric heat pumps. Also, working and middle class households can receive more direct rebates of up to $14,000 total to purchase and install new efficient electric appliances like water heaters, stoves, and ovens. Also, there's an opportunity to upgrade the efficiency of the entire home, retrofitting your home to be more efficient. New rebates can go up to $4,000 for all households and $8,000 for low and moderate income households. Again, this is for home improvements to deal with energy leakage and et cetera. So phenomenal stuff. Obviously, electric vehicles also are in the bill with opportunities for tax credits for immediate rebates, actually, on buying electric vehicles. Again, not for everybody, not for the rich folks, but based on income. And the final thing I want to mention, not quite final, but almost final, is this bill also deals with the resilience issues that are right in front of us, dealing with the climate impacts that our country is facing. Senator, for those of you who followed the law carefully, you noticed that Senator Sinema wanted to deal with the drought situation in the Colorado Basin and in the West generally. So there already was $500 million for that. Now there's $4.5 billion to deal with the systemic problem of serious drought that afflicts a lot of our country. There's $1 billion for the Housing and Urban Development Department to upgrade affordable housing. There's $2.6 billion to help coastal communities prepare for the storm surges and sea rise that's battering their coasts. There's $1.5 billion to the Forest Service to plant more trees in our cities to deal with the urban heat island effect. There's $3 billion for transportation equity and resilience to promote walkability, safety, and affordability in our transportation system. There's a ton of money for rural communities, $9.7 billion for rural electric cooperatives to push for clean energy projects to replace the fossil fuel dependence that they have. $21 billion in climate smart agriculture and forestry practices for our farmers and ranchers and foresters. And then finally, $27 billion in what's called a clean energy accelerator. That's basically a green bank. We're going to create a national green bank that will work with community green banks. Connecticut, New York, several of your states have formed green banks, Maryland, DC. This is going to be green banks on steroids. The idea is to put in the communities revolving funds, low interest opportunities to enable homeowners and small businesses to convert to clean energy. It's all super exciting. It's going to revolutionize our country. It's going to attack the climate like never before. It's going to cut greenhouse gases by 1 gigaton. That's 1 billion metric tons by 2030. We're going to have millions more solar panels, tens of thousands of wind turbines, grid scale battery plants all over the country. It's super exciting, and it's a pleasure to bring you this good news on the Monday after it passed the House and will soon be signed by the president. So thanks very much, and Senator, I'd be happy to take questions if there's a way to do that.
Yes, there is. Thank you. Thank you so much, Special Assistant Hayes. The detail of everything that you have described, I'm sure everyone here has about 10 questions off the top of your head that you'd like to pose to the Special Assistant, and this is your opportunity. So I'd ask those that are interested in asking a question to come up to the microphone, and let's form a line and see how many we can get done with the limited time that we have here. We thank you again very much for being with us, David. It was an outstanding presentation, and it's great to hear all the detail that is in the legislation. Sir, if you could just introduce yourself and then ask the question.
Thank you so much, Special Assistant. I'm Senator David Waters from New Hampshire, and I have two questions on offshore wind. As you know, we have the potential for 25 to 30 gigawatts in the Gulf of Maine. And so the two questions are this. Do you think it's going to be possible through your all-of-government approach to reduce the time frame for the BOEM approval process from the 5 to 7 years? Because, we're going to have our auction in probably June of 24, and we've got to get steel in the water more quickly after that. And then secondly, the New England region is going to be facing very large transmission costs and problems onshoring this power. And I'm wondering if the federal funding and the federal role in helping to deal with, the ISO New England and the FERC and the other issues there. Thank you.
Thank you. And please call me David, everybody. First of all, yes, the offshore wind is a super priority, and we're not talking about 3 to 7 years for permitting. We have 13 projects that are already in the NEPA process, and 2 of them have already come out, and groundbreaking has occurred. We are working under the FIPSI program, the federal infrastructure permitting and steering committee. That this is bipartisan legislation that was passed a couple of years ago, setting up this FIPSI process. There is a dashboard on a federal website that you can find that will track all the projects and the timeframes, et cetera. We're creating a lot of accountability for the companies to get their information in on a timely basis, and then for the agencies to coordinate their evaluation, their NEPA work, and to get the permits out. So this is a huge priority for the president, and he's paying attention to the scheduling and the minutia of this work. So there's that. The transmission issues are serious, both offshore and onshore. We frankly don't want spaghetti lines coming in every community up and down the coast. We want to have a rational system that brings in the power in the right places and that matches up with the capabilities on shore, many of which have to be upgraded. Secretary of Energy Jennifer Granholm is extremely focused on the transmission piece. We just had a workshop a couple of weeks ago the Department of Energy sponsored, where transmission was a key part. Frankly, we're having a lot of discussions with the states and with the ISOs on coordinating the transmission work. We're working with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission as well. So you've got a lot of folks paying a lot of attention, and we're excited about the Gulf of Maine. And there's going to be some announcements this week about the Gulf of Maine. So stay tuned.
Next.
David, State Senator Matt Pouliot from Maine, really excited about the work that's being done with the University of Maine system and the offshore wind up there. But my question to you, we have a lot of folks here from Canada, and Maine recently made a big mistake, in my opinion, by not putting the transmission line on for getting hydropower from Canada down to the grid. I didn't hear too much from you about hydro. I'm wondering what your position is on the role of hydro from our partners up in Canada and how that can help with grid reliability.
Well, hydro is really important, and we were very disappointed to see what happened at the ballot box in Maine on that project. We're cheered by what's happening in terms of bringing Quebec hydropower down to New York State, and have one line that's essentially ready to go. Another looks like it will be. So we're tracking that and very supportive of the clean energy coming from Canada.
Thank you. Next.
Art Handy, state rep in Rhode Island. I've got a question, but first I just wanted to, because I know you're probably doing this sort of I'll call it a stump speech around on things. Rhode Island actually has the first offshore wind farm that's actually been up and running. So that your statement about not yet, that's not true in Rhode Island. At least off Block Island, there's 5. It's only 30 megawatts.
Right.
But it's, it's been doing some work. So just to put that out there, as the guy that had to floor manage the bill on that and got random people whacking me in the head about it, I just remember that well. But the question I had actually was about geothermal at the residential level. Is that part of the credits, the rebates and credits as well in terms of retrofitting and efficiency?
I don't think it is yet. But let me first apologize. I always say, I mean to say commercial scale offshore wind.
As opposed to commercial, okay, yeah.
Yes, commercial
Fair.
scale. I forgot that part. And Secretary Raimondo would slap
Yes,
me
she would.
across the
Yeah.
face if what's really interesting about geothermal is so I don't believe it's built in here to this law yet. But I mentioned there's research money for geothermal, and also the Department of Energy is about to do an earth shot on geothermal, which is a special emphasis of research program to identify opportunities. So I think a lot of us are excited about the promise of geothermal, including for homes and businesses, but it's not quite. It's not as mature yet. So, but we're not going to leave it behind. So I think that's the best I can do for you now.
Thank you. We only have a few minutes left, so let's directly with the question. And,
So much.
And also directly back with an answer. Yes.
Right. Well, Allison Clarkson, Senator in Vermont, thank you so much for your remarks. You're, of course, speaking to a group of us who are fairly leery of investing anything further into nuclear power. And so it is with some concern we also look at this as green energy, which many of our colleagues do. So I think many of us are concerned with, as we go forward, what's being done to neutralize nuclear waste. How can we all feel, what are we doing to actually make us it a cleaner energy? And anyway, that's, I think, the gist of my question. Thanks.
Well, I'm not a nuclear expert, and I hope never to be one. I do know that a lot of the research is on these small reactors, which generate a lot less waste. But it's obviously a very important issue, and there's a lot of experimental work going on. This is not going to move quickly. It's going to move slowly and deliberately and with safety. It's about all I can say. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, sir.
Good morning, David. My name is Timothy Egan. I'm a state rep from Sugar Hill, New Hampshire, and I'm also a college, community college and state college professor. And I was very fascinated to hear you talk about the apprenticeship program. We have a very extensive community college system here in New Hampshire that's trying to help our energy companies expand the EV infrastructure. And because our Canadian colleagues are here, we know how important that infrastructure from Montreal to Boston is. Can you tell us more about that apprenticeship program or where we could find more information to be able to share with our community college presidents and colleagues that are running programs with technical training?
I don't have more detail than the fact that these companies, in order to earn these credits, are going to have to establish these programs. I know that the FL-CIO, for example, is very attuned to this. I would bet if you contact the FL-CIO, they can help get more information to you.
Thank you very much. And the last question.
I guess I'm it. Yeah, I'm the last one. Gordon Johnson, Senator, State of New Jersey. As you probably know, we have a large project, offshore wind project that we're starting down in our state. My question is going to using hydrogen fuel cells for vehicles and stationary energy. How far off are we in getting that to the East Coast, number one, for the vehicles? And also, do you feel that's feasible to really put some time and effort into using hydrogen fuel cells to create energy for cars and stationary power?
Certainly for stationary power. I mean, a huge focus on hydrogen to deal with the larger uses, not so much the vehicles, but the industrial uses of to replace gas, for example. But the focus on vehicles is on electrification and not so much on the fuel cells. But plenty of room, and there's a huge amount of excitement around hydrogen. And the Department of Energy, again, has a hydrogen earthshot to bring down the cost of hydrogen. So if it's successful, who knows? I mean, it may well penetrate the vehicle market. And I'll just mention that Governor Murphy was in that White House meeting with the president a few weeks ago and was an eloquent spokesman for your state and the wonderful ambition that you have for offshore wind. So thank you for your governor.
Thank you very much. And let me just conclude with this final overview question relative to a system of federalism in terms of all of this wonderful information that you're bringing us today and connecting that with executive branch agencies all across the country, and then the outreach to all of us that are in legislature. So we have a better understanding as to what is going on, what kind of regulatory frameworks need to be put in place to receive the resources and all of that. Will there be a plan or a set of conferences or those types of things that can be put in place to continue the education and implementation so we expedite the timeline?
Senator, that's a really good point. I'll bring that back to Julie Rodriguez, who is the Special Assistant to the President for Intergovernmental Affairs. She runs the shop and is the right person to talk to about this. I will tell her that Senator Pacheco was asking, and I think good. it's a great flag. We need to do something like this. We're still a little bit jubilant about what happened, but now the hard work begins, and you guys in state legislatures are going to be central to helping implement this. So much of this is going to happen, obviously, at the state and local level, and so we need all of you.
Well, thank you very much, David, for your expertise in bringing it to us on behalf of the President and the Vice President. Thank you very much for being with us today. Let's give them another round of applause from CSG East.
Thank you.
Thank you
Appreciate it
so much. Thank you.
My pleasure.